right, welcome to another Bloodthirsty Salamander experience with your hosts Steven and Justin. Tonight we're going to be talking about the NIL, name and likeness, and the transfer portal, just all through college sports. I know the focus will be football, but there's a lot of cool stuff. But tonight, what's really cool is we're going to have an accomplished athlete joining us to share his experience and insight on tonight's topics. And, as we start every episode, Steven, what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking a honey kolsch, again from Emerson Nice Brewery out of Owasso. Another good beer that they have. So, how about yourself, Justin?
Well, I stayed true to this Juicy Bear IPA. It has extra vitamin C, I'm sure. Definitely need it for this time of year. So I just wanted to make sure I kept, everything in there. Keep me healthy. Keep me going. Yeah. But definitely, I'm real interested to learn about Nathan and, his experiences. He has played collegiate baseball, basketball over at Eastern Oklahoma State before he transferred over to OSU. Go Pokes, that's Oklahoma State University for you internationals, where he was a walk-on college wide receiver alongside, popular names, Dez Bryant, Brandon Weedon, that guy? No. But he also was able to pursue his passion a bit further, play arena football in Tulsa, which is a unique experience that's not always available after college for everybody. So after playing that, he moved down to McKinney, was able to coach a little bit, continue that passion, share it with others, which is where he got introduced to bobsledding. And that was actually able to take him all the way around the world and even gave him a chance to be in the Olympics. So without further ado, Nathan, welcome to the Bloodthirsty Salamander experience.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're definitely welcome. Are you drinking tonight anything?
I am. I'm drinking a little Jack and honey. It's just a little sipper, so
classic.
Keep the vocal cords wet and have some fun.
That's exactly
Very
it.
nice. Can't go wrong with the Jack and honey. So I mainly wanted to, we talk all the time. Me and Nathan are longtime friends, probably since preschool.
Oh yeah,
way back to my Claremore Christian days,
that's right.
And Nathan dominated that Forest World there as well. What's funny too is you were the small one when we were kids, and now you're like what 6'4", 6'5", like 220 plus pounds.
Goodness.
Yeah, definitely a late bloomer when it comes to size. Yeah, Steven was always bigger than me when we were growing up as kids, and I don't know, about 15 years old when I really hit my growth spurt. Yeah, so took off.
We probably hadn't seen each other in a while, just going to different schools and stuff at that time. And I was like, what? Wait, no, come again? Yeah. Like, this isn't right. No, we talk a lot of college football. I mean, mainly we talk about OU and OSU being local Oklahoma kids. And then you obviously going to OSU. The main topic that keeps coming up with us lately and how it's affecting college football is the NIL stuff and transfer portal, which are both pretty new to college and have seemingly created, you put it, the wild, wild west college football. And I think the biggest name right now that is really kind of just throwing everybody for a loop is Caleb Williams, just quarterback from Oklahoma, one of the top freshmen in the country. All of a sudden he's leaving Oklahoma and going school to school looking who's got the most money.
Yeah, it's completely when I was there. It was really locked down on every little thing that you could even have. I mean, if somebody bought you dinner that wasn't a family member, you had to pay for it. Like, you had to give them the money back. You had to do it all. Like, you literally couldn't accept gas cards. Somebody just wanted to help you get home for the holidays. So yeah, it's a completely different show, and just it really is changing, like you said, the whole landscape of college football in general. And I think it's just going to be interesting to see how it continues to evolve, because it can't really keep up the way that it's going. They're going to have to be some changes made, I think.
When the NCAA put rules in place to create parity within the colleges, and, back in the day, it was the wild, wild west, and you had schools like Nebraska, Oklahoma, Miami, whoever, Ohio State, they would go and they would get everybody. Mm-hmm. You had all these teams at the top, but no room for anyone in the middle or below to grow. Obviously, a lot of backdoor deals and stuff like that going on as far as money and cars and watches and things like that go to get players to come to your school.
Right.
And so they came up with the NCAA and, started putting rules in place. to essentially create more of an equal playing field for other smaller schools. And it really seems like the NIL has just erased all that.
I think for a long time, just kind of like you said, there's almost like a facade to the NCAA. Like you kind of felt like they had a lot of power, right? You felt like they had the ability to basically direct your season if you didn't follow every little thing that they did. And then with NIL, it kind of just pulls the curtain back and been like, nobody really challenged us until this point. And then you can kind of see now that you got something legally saying, hey, that wasn't, you guys have people working for free. You know, that's not okay. What is the NCAA really? I mean, because now you can basically challenge just about anything that they do. After this ruling, you're going to win.
And two, it's like they flex on who they can and cower down to who they can't. For instance, Kansas basketball and the FBI and the shoe deals and all that stuff. And it's like, oh man, they're going to slam Kansas. Well, Kansas basically gives them the bird, and they, as of right now, seem to just like drop that whole deal. And then they're like, but you know what? OSU, you probably can't do anything, and you really didn't do anything wrong, but we got to punish somebody, so we're going to ban you from the postseason.
Exactly right. You know, it was sad to see kind of what happened to OSU, obviously as an alum and a fan, but just from a standpoint of like the precedent that you're setting, right? Like I know at the time OSU thought they were doing the right thing by saying, okay, this is the little that we did do. We didn't know what was going on. You know, here's what happened. We fired this guy immediately. The player gave all the money back, and it was $300, I think. And I think it was to go home over Christmas break because he didn't have any money. You know, how terrible. So they thought, hey, if we're open about it, we fire him, we'll be fine. You know, then all of a sudden you look back, it's a year ban, 3 scholarships, all this other stuff. And like you said, Kansas is basically giving the NCAA the finger and said, hey, good luck finding what you can. Even though there's trails leading to basically, you know, they're an Adidas school. So they have Adidas agents and all kinds of stuff with text messages and everything. But KU didn't give them anything, and they said, we'll see you in court. And they've had 0 repercussions for any of their actions. So it's just, like you said, it's wild.
Yeah, and then I really haven't seen it in basketball yet with players in the NIL deal. You know, the NCAA's hand was kind of forced because a lot of state legislative branches were passing the law, basically superseding the NCAA, and they really didn't have any power at that point, and they were pretty much reactive rather than proactive, and then basically put no rules on anything. It's just like donors can pay you. From what I've read, literally a donor at OSU or a donor at OU could pay any player $20,000 to come hang out of a party and eat and talk to guests, and it's totally legal. Whereas, you know, in the past, boosters weren't supposed to be involved, and if you got caught with them involved and paying players, and, you know, that was all big no-no, and now there's nothing to it. But what I didn't expect for it to happen and happen so quickly, and I feel naive for not seeing where it was going to go as quickly as it is, you know, because it's supposed to be for a player that's established. In my head, it was going to be players that are established and they're stars at their schools. They're going to start making money off their names, and which is, to me, it's fair. You know, you go and you prove yourself and you want to make money off your name. Great. That's awesome.
I feel like that's mixed with that transfer portal. Like if the transfer portal wasn't there,
definitely.
They wouldn't be go out searching for the NIL deals to switch and transfer. Like if it was just that classic, I think so, because there's no regulation. They're just able to freely look out for themselves, but it kind of hurts a lot of the institution because the institution was made off that honor system in a lot of the ways, and it's an interesting thing for me, like coming from the soccer world, thinking about these 15-year-olds are getting millions of dollars where these grown-ass men can go buy alcohol and they can't get anything beside a piece of paper, basically. And they're putting their body into so much turmoil at the end.
Right.
To not make it to like the one wide receiver in Alabama. Good thing his ACL tear isn't that bad. He can still get his NFL deal because what did he have up to that point? Won a national championship or two, but nothing.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think, and Stephen made a good point. It just kind of, I think originally everybody had this nice thought of like, hey, this is going to go to the one guy that's on the cover of NCAA football for PlayStation, and he's going to get the money that he should have been getting this whole time. Or, I remember even whenever I had just left Oklahoma State, 2010. They're, coming into a big year. That 2011 year was a lot of anticipation, and I remember talking with Brandon Weedon, and he's looking in all the stores, and they all have a number 3 jersey, and he's like, I don't know why I'm not getting a $5 off of every jersey that's sold, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. I completely agree, right, Steven? So that's kind of what we're getting at. Like, okay, I can see why those guys deserve to make money off their likeness. So I think that's probably the original thought behind the rule and the ruling. And so I think that's probably where it started, but obviously not where it has ended up very quickly.
Yeah, because, it took it start last summer, and this was really the first recruiting cycle. And you got a small school like Jackson State, Deion Sanders got a bunch of connections, and no chance in hell was this kid ever going to go to Jackson State, a number 1 player in the country, number 1 cornerback in the country, and committed to Florida State the whole process. And then all of a sudden, Sanders uses a connection. Barstool says, hey, if you go to this school, we'll give you a $1.5 million deal. Whew. Kid may not ever even be good in college.
Right.
There's tons of...
It's like Quinn Ewers, right? That at Ohio State, right? He sat behind C.J. Stroud. Obviously should have. C.J.'s an amazing quarterback. Takes over $1 million. Transfers. Now he's getting another $1 million by another Texas booster. So he's going to have $2 million in his bank before he's ever even played a college football down.
Yeah. And it's insanity. And now, you get reports out of Texas A&M signed the highest rated class ever. And it has zero to do with what they've done on the football field. Right. They spent an estimated $25 to $30 million in NIL money to secure this class.
Well, they have the scouts to get all that prerequisite stuff. Like, they knew what they were doing on the field. It's the same in I feel like the college institution isn't set up for the pro mindset.
No, I get what you're saying, but like, the NCAA is littered with failed 5-stars.
Think about it. Yeah, we can bring up OU, for example, right? The reason why OU is really good is because you have amassed large amounts of talent, right? And then a couple of those guys pop. But how many for every, I guess Caleb Williams is the most common one, but right? How many quarterbacks did we go through at OU before you had a couple transfers that came in, like a Baker and Kyler and stuff like that, right? You had
Trevor Knight, Blake Bell.
Right.
Blake Bell was a 5-star quarterback too.
Landry Jones, you can go, obviously.
Yeah. Blake Bell's still playing in the NFL, but as a tight end.
Tight end, right? Exactly, right? And like you said, Trevor Knight, you can go down all the blue blood schools like that, and it's not necessarily that they have 15 of them. It's the 5 of them that pop that make a big difference, right? And
I followed OU really closely, and probably of the 10 5-stars they've had in the last 15 years, maybe 3 of them were good.
Right. Wasn't Buki a 5-star?
Who?
Buki.
He was 4-star, 5-star, depending on the site. But yeah, some places did have him 5-star.
I'm just saying, like, guys like that, right? They come in and you're like, hey, you got to play right away. And you're like, what?
And this kid doesn't even have NFL talent.
Right.
Examples that shine out to me that at OU that never did nothing, that were a 5-star. Stephen Good, top 5 player out of Texas. He was an offensive lineman, supposed to be the next great thing. I don't even know if he ever started a game at OU. RJ Washington was defensive end, 5-star, top 10 player in the country out of Texas. Never did anything. He had one good bowl game in his entire career. Jermaine Calhoun transferred. The kid named Miller, he transferred out after one season as a running back, and then he ended up starting at Texas A&M as a cornerback. And Rhett Bomar, 5-star. He had a lot of talent, but he flamed out, got kicked off the team, went to
which would be nothing now, right?
Yeah, like
a little Big Red Sports and Imports money.
Oh yeah, he would be.
Right now.
Oh yeah, like he would not even be in trouble whatsoever.
Exactly.
Like he would have made twice the money. I mean, we were talking about like $2,500.
Right. The funny thing about that too is so whenever I was down in McKinney, I was training with a couple guys, and I was training with one of the guys at the time. He was a wide receiver, um, Travis Wilson, and
Yeah, from OU.
yes, and
Yeah.
so I was talking to him about that, and I was like, "Man, what happened?" He said, "You want to be honest?" He said the only reason that he got caught is because he wanted a tax return. So he filed taxes on the money that he got from Big Red Sports like an employee basis rather than just taking the money and walking.
What? Like,
So he filed it. Yeah, that's why he got in trouble.
man, why
Because
would
he
you
said
want taxes on that? $2,500.
he thought he was going to get a tax return. So there's a couple other guys there. He said like they kind of all had like a back office at Big Red Sports Imports where you'd show up and just get your check. And he said, everybody was fine with the whole deal. And he said, I won't even tell you a couple names, but you would know who they were, obviously. And he said, the only reason that anybody even sniffed this thing out is because he filed taxes.
Yeah, and what happened too was they sold the dealership. And when they were going through the audit, that's when someone, and she happened to be a Texas A&M alum.
Oh, okay.
She was doing the auditing of all the numbers and stuff, and these checks going out to these kids, they didn't make sense to her. And then she saw the name, and then it started to make sense, and that's how it first got leaked out.
That's wild.
Yeah,
that's wild.
So just if they would have never sold it, nobody would have ever known.
Right. But yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see, like you said, how this goes, right? Because I think it's going to take a few donors a couple times to get burned on a couple kids, to really be like, hey, either I'm going to have a contract here that says, this is for 3 years, and if you never touch the field, you owe me X amount back. There's going to start being some more business savvy moves on their part rather than just trying to get the kids in there, right? Because I think you're going to see kids bounce around with.
Well, yeah, once they got the money, they got no
Right.
need to stay. You already gave me the money. I don't got a contract. I'm out.
Right, or you might even start seeing like incentive laden deals, like you kind of see in the NFL, right? Like, hey, if you start 8 games your freshman year, here's an extra $200,000,
right?
Or stuff like that. I think is probably going to be more feasible, and kind of how you see the market kind of correct itself.
Well, and then you're talking more like NFL free agency versus here's this money, come here. We at least know you're going to be here whether you're good or not.
Yeah, but I think one of the downsides I can see coming in the next couple of years as this kind of starts to correct itself is either institutions are going to start possibly having you sign 4-year deals or 3-year deals or something along those lines that like try to block you from doing certain moves because they're almost losing the incentive to sign you to the scholarship in the first place because they're just going to be out the money every year. And the NCAA still has not come up with a good way to say if a kid leaves that you can fulfill that scholarship the next year. You still have only the 25 limit on the amount of kids that you can sign, regardless if 10 of them leave in the portal, you can still only sign 25 that next class. And they haven't figured out a way to equalize that yet.
Haven't they did a little bit of that though with the portal though? Can't you pretty much bring in what goes out?
Yes, you can, correct, with the portal, but you can't do that with young kids.
Right, you can't decide to do that with freshmen.
Right, exactly. So they've done it a little bit with the portal, but I mean, take for instance like a school like Oklahoma State versus Oklahoma, right? Oklahoma State's going to have, unless you can really offer true playing time and an impact position, you're probably going to lose out on some of these portal battles with kids trying to go to Blue Buds and really trying to pop, hey, I want to go to OU, I want to go to Ohio State and these type of things. So there's more of a focus for them to kind of get a lower rated guy and work them through the system and get them to buy in, as opposed to possibly trying to win another recruiting battle in the portal itself. So there's a lot of ins and outs to it.
No, that makes perfect sense because, and let's just use OSU as an example here because you have a lot of schools like OSU that are good schools, produce quality football teams, but they're not.
Are you talking about the OSU or Oklahoma State?
Oklahoma State.
All right.
That's right.
Did I say that wrong?
No,
Well,
I said
no, you
the
said
OSU
OSU.
or Oklahoma State.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
no. Yeah, Oklahoma State. Yeah.
I
Because
know we got
they're
some of the OSU fans.
okay. Yeah. So they're a good school. They win. They produce good talent, but they don't have a huge recruiting budget. They're not
Right.
finishing in the top 10, usually not even in the top 20 recruiting
Right.
yearly. But they
Right.
get guys that they see are going to be good in 2 to 3 years. And then they've developed a culture to keep these guys here and stick with the program. And that's, what you've seen this year with OSU is an extreme rarity at this point in college football.
Right.
Senior laden team that they stuck with the program. They were committed and, had a really good season. But that's what it takes for teams like OSU to be good, is to get those guys, get them to stay on campus and develop. And then when they're junior and seniors, put really good football teams on the field.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's going to, it takes a couple guys you got to find that maybe pop, right? Like, OSU's been really fortunate in the past with guys like Justin Blackman or James Washington, guys like that. They kind of have to go that route and kind of pick through a few things. But, it's one of those things that I think that part's maybe even just getting a little bit more difficult, a little bit more murky, trying to talk kids into staying for 3 or 4 years without really having an impact, as opposed to this portal that opens up for them that says, hey, I can go play somewhere else in the Big 12. I can go play at TCU, right? We're even seeing kids go inside of state, inside conference. And I don't blame them for it. It's just unheard of. Whenever I was playing, sounds like an old, whenever I was playing, back in my day, you couldn't even transfer in conference. And that's the truth. They wouldn't allow it.
If somehow, you did, it was a 2-year loss of eligibility.
Right. I mean, it was like, I think there's a few guys that kind of started fighting it, like if their mother was sick or something like that, and they wanted to come home to Texas. And
they were getting exemptions.
Right. But it was very rare, and it was really frowned upon too. Like guys were like seen as like backstabbing, right? If you did something like that. But not anymore, man. It's highest bidder. And there's some good stuff to it. I mean, hey, if a kid can make some money, go for it. But there's going to have to be some real regulation coming in here in the next year or two, I think, to even this out.
But that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's overlooked with all this is we're only talking about 2 to 3% of the kids that this is really even affecting.
Exactly.
Right? They're the ones getting the money. Your third string defensive tackle is not seeing any money. The fourth string cornerback is not seeing any money.
Right.
You got maybe a couple guys on your team that are making money, and everybody else is, it's the status quo. I mean, they might be getting more $100 handshakes and stuff like that. But, really, it's just 2 to 3%. And it's kind of the same thing when it comes to how many of those kids are getting out of there and going to the NFL. It's like 2 to 3%.
Right.
Like,
I mean, everybody thinks they're a first-round draft pick, but unfortunately there's only 32 of them. And there's a lot more teams than 32 in college football, right? So
right.
Same thing goes for this. I think some of the unintended consequences I could see down the line also is some of these schools don't make the money like OU or OSU does. They're not very fiscally responsible with some of this stuff. Well, it's like, okay, well, if the students are not going to be locked into the institution itself, well, then how's the institution going to be able to provide some of these extra things that they have been over the past? It's like, well, now you can go make your own money and buy this for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. No, I thought that's a way to fight back for the institutions.
Right.
Because I was telling Justin this and he couldn't believe it, but it's like 10 athletic departments in the country that even operate in the black.
Yeah, that's about right. I mean, it's not very many, man. And it's all because of football, but that's the only reason they're in the black to begin with. Right.
TV deals and the way the conferences split up the money.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you go to big bowls, they pay out pretty good. But yeah, it's not like that there's just this massive amount of, with let's say a team like Tulsa, they're not making any money.
No, but I could see a dealership like just showing that appreciation, like some of those small colleges that aren't trying to win people over. But I think like $300 to go home, a car to drive around in, something just to get like that local marketing aspect is going to also be something maybe we see. Could be. Opens the door for it.
I agree. I think there's going to be a lot of creativity, right? Just like you said, I think it's going to be like, hey, you can eat at our restaurant free on Friday nights. We're going to host a radio show here. You know what I'm saying?
Boom.
Stuff like that. I think it's definitely already happening, and it's going to be happening more. But I think the hard part is everybody sees the big money, right? You see this. How much is Texas A&M bringing in every year? How much is OU, Texas? But like you said, Stephen, I mean, even if you look within the Big 12, Kansas, you think they're operating in a positive? You think Iowa State's operating at a positive? I mean, they're a solid program, but I guarantee they're not operating positives. TCU, Baylor, I mean, until this last year, Baylor built that brand new stadium, and then they weren't even able to fill it out.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, it's not the business, in my opinion, that it's portrayed to be. It is big business, and there is a lot of money to be made. There's also a lot of money to be lost when you play business.
But it's like most things in life, the money's at the top, and there's not much at the bottom.
Right. And until you spin big, you don't win big. And in order to win big, you got to find somebody to spin big. So it's
and now definitely you got to spin big.
Right.
And it's not only that, it's like when your starting quarterback's coming to you at a school like Oklahoma and being like, hey, I need better NIL those. What can you offer me? And then I'm going to go see what everybody else can offer me. And whoever's got the best offer, that's where I'm going to go.
Well, and I heard a former administrator at OU on the radio today, and he just retired, and he was saying one of the most gray areas right now in all of this is that it's open to interpretation by the university. So the way OU reads it is that the university cannot funnel somebody to go make money off the NIL. The booster club can come up and do something and say, hey, you know, this is what we can do. Well, obviously there's going to be schools that are going to be more inclined to working in the gray and then apologizing later. So I would imagine they've already got things set up and they're already funneling guys straight down the road to certain places. You know what I mean?
Well,
so there's a lot of gray area.
I was talking with Steven. I was like, use all the resources, and there's blocks on it. And I'm like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I'm always thinking of it in that professional sports mindset that it's like, they're just going to do the best for their player and things like that. So it's like interesting, you know, that there is a block that the school can't be like, you need to talk to Golden Corral. They'll give you a nice sponsorship.
Right. Because it's supposed to be name, image, likeness, right? Your name, your image, your likeness, not the universities. And so there's supposed to be basically like a separation of church and state. But it's really
and OU's approach, and a lot of other schools' approach to this was, hey, we're going to come up with these classes and stuff to show you how to market yourself.
Right.
Absolutely.
Like, we can't market you. We can't introduce you to people, but we can show you how to market your brand. And that's kind of been OU's approach and a lot of other people's approach. And then you got schools like Texas A&M and Texas, and they're like, here's $50,000 if you come here to play offensive line, we'll pay you $50,000 a year.
Right.
Now, they're doing it through their boosters, but just as there was a kid that came to OU, he was committed to OU, the coaching staff left. He committed to Texas because he wasn't sure about what was going to happen at OU. The new staff comes in, talks to him. He recommits to OU and signs with OU. But when his interview, he said on the radio here in Oklahoma, he's like, you know, when I went to Texas, the only thing they talked to me about was money. He said, Oklahoma talked to me about football and developing me as a player and a person. And I'm going to school for football, you know, to become a better person and get an education, not some short-term money, because my goals are to play in the NFL. Right. And, you know, it is, a lot of these guys will get lured into short-term money, and yeah, that's great for a couple of years, right? But then if you don't get your education, if you don't make it to the NFL, that money's gone, and then you got to figure out what's next.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's the sad part too, right? Is you're going to see these kids, unfortunately, you always hear the horror stories of NFL guys, right? Like blowing their whole signing bonus before they've ever played a down, right? Well, they were 22 years old. What do you think an 18-year-old kid's going to do with no guidance? You know what I mean? Like that's I really hope, and I'm sure that there's universities and coaches and things doing the right thing, but there's going to be a lot of that, and it's going to be unfortunate.
But when you give a kid that kind of money, is he going to listen?
No,
Right.
I mean, obviously, hey, I'm making more than the coach. What are you going to tell me?
Yeah.
It's going to be like an NFL mindset, right? Like,
And the other thing I worry about too that doesn't really get talked about in all this is, I mean, they don't teach us how to do taxes in high school. They don't prepare us for the real world.
That's why it starts. I was going to say before high school, like with the marketing yourself into college. Like you came from a small school, graduated with like 15 people. When I was doing collegiate club soccer, like I was taking all these classes to learn how to promote myself to colleges, and then was able to get the college scholarship at a JUCO because my grades were horrible, but my soccer skills were good. So, so went there. But it was like at that beginning phase before the colleges say, "Hey, this is how you promote yourself." I think if the transition is going to where the name and likeness is an actual opportunity, it has to be in that high school realm to learn how to market yourself, because it's just going to be that. Like whoever gets the best marketing, largest TikTok following, somebody's going to go that way because you're going to bring merch to that community.
But marketing's great and stuff. But what I'm talking about is when you get that cash.
Oh yeah,
like the kid that went to Jackson State.
Realm.
Like, what if he goes and buys his mom a house, buys himself a car, spends all that money, and then at the end of the year, Uncle Sam's like, "Hey, where's our cut?" And he don't have any money anymore. Like he blew it all.
Yeah.
Like because if these companies or whoever's giving you this deal isn't taking the taxes out of it for you, a lot of these kids are going to be screwed. They're going to owe the government a ton of money, and they're not going to have that money anymore.
Yeah, it's the risk.
Nope.
Like, because I can tell you now, unless my parents pulled me aside or whatever at 18, as you give me $1.5 million, I'm thinking it's all mine.
Every cent. Like,
I'm not thinking that I got to pay taxes on it. Like, I'm thinking, hey, let's go on a spending spree. And then when it's all gone and they're like, oh, yeah, you got to give Uncle Sam 20% of that. Wait, what?
Like, who's that?
Like, yeah. That's stuff that's not talked about. And, that's right there is enough to mess up your life if you can't parlay that into an NFL career, pay that money back, or you can't keep making money.
I mean, there's already guys that do that, right? So like, you can take out lines of credit with your agent. So a lot of guys will do that and they'll bank on themselves before they've even played it down. Then all of a sudden they don't get that first round money. They go in the third round and then they don't get that bonus. And the agent's like, hey, I was your bank. Here's the interest.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that goes on too. So you start talking money, there's a lot of people that have pockets.
Even these players that hire financial advisors, and a lot of those guys are shady. Like happened to Dez Bryant. Like had this financial advisor and they were robbing him blind and he didn't really know what was going on. I mean, how could you know? Like, you hired this guy to take care of your money and all of a sudden your money's gone and this guy's like, oh, I don't know. Like, what do you do? And then you're trying to take a lawsuit out against him and, it's a mess.
Yep. No, it is a mess and it's going to be interesting. I think, I think there's some good things to it, but I think, the closer you get to a more professional model, the less separation you're going to have between what makes college any better than NFL. If they're starting to act the exact same way, right? So you're going to start taking away some of that pageantry, some of those things that really separate college football, and what people love about college football, what people really love about. I mean, we don't even see OU Nebraska anymore, right? You don't even. Here for a while, we don't know the next time we're going to see Bedlam.
Right, and that's all money driven.
Exactly. So you start taking away these things that are the fabric of college football because of money. Well, then it's just the NFL for younger kids. And what's going to be your selling point to TV markets is, unless you're just a farm system for the NFL, is what you're going to end up looking like. I think it's going to
lead into is hopefully always again with the soccer professional is like there's so many tiers because there's not 32 colleges. There's so many players out there that are ready to contribute and there's money to be made, a little bit of that, So if they were able to go in there and just make their little deals, go with it, I think it's going to go that way. The NCAA will maybe just be its own different level of professionalism in a separate entity from the institutions where they're just going to be throwing in their added education bonus to the club associated with them originally. Kind of like how the soccer is like these guys are from 200 years ago making it up. It's just clubs put together by the workers and then they're like, oh, hey, it's Manchester United.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it was just a dock with a bunch of dock workers who formed a soccer team. That's all it is. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a more progression into that if there's no like clear regulation on what they can and can't do, because it is the Wild West. And I'm just like thinking, if it goes this way, there's going to be a commissioner. The NCAA will change its name and then form into another like mid-pro level into a farming system for the NFL or for the other, what I call them like super club models we have here in the U.S., MLB, the NHL. Like, at least they have farmer teams, but I think they could do a better job promoting those.
See, and here's my problem with that idea is that, like we've talked about, we're talking about paying players at that point. Like, they're all getting paid. And that's all well and good, but who's going to pay them?
Donors.
The NFL's not involved. So there's your money. The NFL would be your money for the farm teams because, like, in all of soccer, these clubs, they fund all these kids that they pay. Mm-hmm. All these kid teams, all the money they make is how they're paying these kids and how they are, going out and signing different kids and then getting them and growing them and hopefully bringing them up to their pro team and hoping they scouted them right and developed them right and all that stuff. But the problem is, if you're a school and you're not making money anyways, you're operating in the red, how are you going to pay a player? Like, how are you going to pay your 85 scholarship players? Like, how big's a soccer roster generally, Justin?
Yeah, 18 is
was it 18?
Yeah, so we're going from 18
on game
to
day?
85, and that's just so you can have healthy numbers at each position. And then at that point, if you're having to pay them, then those scholarship numbers are probably going to come down. And then you might be looking at the NFL where more of that system where you got 53 men on a roster.
Mm-hmm. Practice squad,
Yeah, in practice and all the...
And that's going to cut out a lot of opportunities for other kids.
Right. Yeah, I think, what my biggest fear, and it's kind of what I alluded to earlier, is like, how many times have we tried the XFL? How many times have we tried the USFL?
That's a very good point.
So it's like, the reason why it doesn't work, why? Because you actually end up competing with the NFL rather than working together. And it's just a lesser version. There's not enough separation from it.
Yeah, and you don't have the top talent, so you can't compete.
Right. So that's my biggest fear for college football right now, is the closer you get to the NFL model, then you're going to start being compared to the NFL, and you're going to lose every time.
Would it benefit anything to do more of that soccer model where it's all, if you do good, you get promoted?
I've actually kind of thought about that, especially with the NFL, with how popular it is, right? Because they've talked about going Europe. They've talked about, putting a couple clubs in Germany or a couple of clubs in London, those type of things. I think that's a possibility, especially now that they're starting to expand. We got one more game this year. There's talks of making it 18 games in a couple years, So
with injuries and the concussion thing, which seems to be starting to pop up in former players a lot more, I see that 18th game really hard.
I agree, and I think you're going to have to definitely expand from 53. There's no way you're going to get through 18 with a 53-man roster and only X amount on a practice squad. So, like you said, I think that's a good thought. I think there's a lot to that. I think that it keeps poor teams engaged. It's going to eliminate tanking, obviously, on purpose, which is a big deal in American sports.
But were you talking NFL or were you talking college, Justin?
Really either one, because I think they should integrate if they're going to...
The power conferences and stuff like that, and the model that they're pushing towards, this Power 5, and it seems to be growing into super conferences. Relegation, to me, that's the way to go in college football.
That would be fun.
Because you have your top tier, and you got to keep doing good to stay up there, and if you don't, then you drop down, and somebody else can...
What was that, Justin? Was that Leicester City? What was that, about 5 years ago, whenever they won the...
Yeah, they came from nowhere.
Right, it was like
dominated everything.
A tenth of the budget of the super clubs in Europe.
Yeah, they have like $5 million on the field. The other ones are like, well, we got $500 million.
Right, exactly. They ran away with that thing.
Great. It's obviously possible. Yeah,
they've been a good club.
Yeah, it's always possible. But even like in a few others, like they just work their way up. There's always the big five. There's always those top five, but they got to be competed against and kind of share their wealth when they go to the lower tier ones, because they still pack the stadium at a home or at a away game. So that's really a benefit for those lower tier on the revenue side.
Yeah. That's kind of what they do, the revenue sharing in Major League Baseball too, to kind of help bring up some of the lower clubs, when you got the Yankees and Red Sox and Cubs that have the $200 million payrolls. And that's how the Tampa Bay Rays can get to the World Series with 55 in the books. It's like, that's how it works. But yeah, I think that's interesting. I think it's just happening so fast. It's just evolving, and then anybody that says they know exactly what's happening is lying. Because, I mean, like Steven's opened up with, it's like Caleb Williams. I mean, he's the perfect example right now, and he's the one that's exposing it for what it is right now, and he has the most power. Because he could literally go and change USC's fortunes very quickly.
Oh yeah, I mean, take OU for example with Baker Mayfield. Like, they were not, right. I mean, in that good of a position. They were struggling, and all of a sudden you put a good quarterback in there, and they're in the playoffs.
Bam. Or it's even like, I know Georgia won, but I mean, you replace Stetson Bennett with Caleb Williams. Does that even end up being a game?
No, they would have blew Georgia out twice. I mean, they would have blew Bam out twice.
Right? So, I mean, he knows that, and his dad knows that, apparently. And so they're using that to their advantage.
Yeah, it's like, okay, you guys got by with like pretty much a walk-on at quarterback, and that's great, but imagine if you had Caleb. And Georgia knows that.
Yeah, and if obviously we said the same thing about Rattler this past season, but I mean, if you're looking at a guy with his size, combination, ability, a top 5 pick in 2 years.
Right.
I mean, I don't think that's a stretch. And so you just talk about putting that on the field. It changes everything.
Rattler's another good example with the NIL stuff. I mean, I think in his total NIL stuff, he was making about $1 million at OU.
And 2 cars to drive around?
Yeah, $500,000 in cars to drive around. And then by the middle of the season, he's not even the starter anymore.
Right.
And now he's not even at OU anymore.
And he doesn't owe them a penny.
He just walked away with that money. Like, and that's all well and good, right? I mean,
good for him, right? Good for him.
Yeah, like, I'm not hating on him. I'm not saying he shouldn't be out there making that money, but it doesn't, it just doesn't make sense. And, this guy's one of Nathan's favorite. He's on sports radio here in Oklahoma. His name's Sam Mays. He said something the other day, and I just thought, are you kidding me? Like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. He said that the NIL is going to make more parity in college football, and said, there will be guys that go to OSU to be quarterback and make money there and whatever. And, I thought some of that might be going on too, right? But if OU can't keep their starting quarterback because they can't get him enough money, what makes you think a school like OSU is going to be able to go out there and attract a top quarterback to come there for NIL money?
Or keep him.
Yeah.
Keep him.
If OU can't keep Caleb Williams,
you find a diamond.
How's OSU going to keep Caleb Williams?
Well, yeah, right. It's like you find a diamond, right? You worked hard. You did your due diligence. You went to West Texas, pulled this kid out of 8-man football. All of a sudden, he's awesome. Right?
Yep. Did everything like that. Did everything but gave him money.
And then it's like, okay, I'm ready to go. And it's like, well, what did we just do all this for? It's like, I haven't seen anything come of it, but I've heard rumors of a guy like Deuce Vaughn at Kansas State is looking.
Oh, yeah. He's not going to make any money at Kansas State, but somebody out there is going to pay him.
But I'm just saying, Kansas State was like the only Power 5 school to offer him because he's 5'5", and things like that. So you find a guy like that. He goes all Big 12, and now he says, "Okay,
I think I'm going to go look somewhere else.
I'll go run for Auburn for a year." You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
When they say that, do
That's
they just
all
put themselves
in
the
transfer portal?
Yep.
And then once you're in the transfer portal, it's
like open recruiting, just like when you were in high school.
Yeah, so you'll get phone calls, but there's not even enough regulations on that like there was in high school. Like, you could only have X amount of calls, visits. No,
but
there's nothing.
Portal, the idea that tampering isn't going on before they even get in the portal is absurd.
Well, yeah. I mean, think about it. For most kids, like, one thing that's always kind of like been a pet peeve of mine is a lot of people view like your relationship with your college football head coach like, hey, I could just go walk into Coach Gundy's office anytime and he'd say, "Hey, Nathan, how you doing? Hey, there's 115 dudes on this roster and he's got a whole CEO approach," right? So, like, the thought process that he is just, everybody's pal and you can go sit down and talk to him. My relationship was with my strength coaches and my position coach. because those are the people I saw every single day. I hung out with, I talked to, they knew me personally, things like that. So, I think the number one thing is like when you see like position coaches move a lot, right? Because they're trying to move up and bump, bump, bump as they should, but they're also the ones that recruited those guys there. And so like for instance, if somebody's saying I'm going to stay at so-and-so school because my head coach is here, that usually doesn't fly unless you're Nick Saban, because you're looking to go. I mean, you even see guys, what was that kid from Clemson that enrolled at OU and didn't even have a scholarship? He's waiting for it, but he went ahead and enrolled because he wanted to play for Coach Venables.
Oh, well, he signed a financial aid agreement.
Exactly, but I'm saying like it wasn't an athletic scholarship at that time.
Yeah, that was kind of more.
He has to wait for the new semester for it to open up.
Tell Sweeney I ain't coming. Money driven. Like,
exactly, but my point being is that as much as assistant coaches move around, players.
I get your point. He was going to Clemson because of a position coach, because of a defensive coordinator, right, not because of Dabo Sweeney.
Exactly, right? I mean, and I think that's kind of a misnomer when you look at college football in general, is because everybody that played on the Friday Night Lights and you knew your high school football coach and he did everything for you, that no longer that way at that level. It's, hey, he's your head football coach, and if you're really good and you've been there for a while, he gets to know you. But I mean, that's just not the reality, that you're not best friends.
You took an interesting route to football at OSU because you didn't play in high school and stuff. But even in high school, when you first start like fall camp and stuff, everybody's got their name taped on their helmet.
Right.
Because they don't know who you are. And the only reason they're going to remember your name and figure out who you are is if you're good.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not good and then you make a play in practice or something, you'll hear a head coach asking the position coach, hey, who is that?
Mm-hmm.
So that's in high school. Even though they recruit you and stuff like that, and college and offer you a scholarship and stuff, if you're not playing, there's a good chance the head coach might not know who you are.
Right. I mean, he's gonna, I'm not saying anybody will do you wrong on purpose, but I mean, just the turnover and the rate of your job is Saturday to Saturday, right? I mean, losses will get you out the door.
Mm-hmm.
So they're got to focus on what's going to get them a W on a Saturday, and you can't blame them for it. It's just the way that it works.
Yeah. And kind of talking about the transfer portal too more, like I 100% agree with the transfer portal, just like I'm not against kids making money off of their name and what they're doing on the field. Like that all makes sense to me because coaches can jump from school to school with no punishment, like no recourse. And it only makes sense that, a player should have that opportunity to some degree as well.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I will say this though, is you're going to start having universities, say for instance, Stanford, what is that? $80,000 a year to go to Stanford. So you leave there with 2 years of their education and you're piecing out. How long is it going to take before somebody says, hey, you owe me $160,000?
I mean, I've thought about that as a one way. I haven't thought about it in like that sense, but we have all these bowl game opt-outs now. And I've thought that is maybe a way to correct the opt-outs, is to say, okay, well, you're not playing this game, then you owe us for the last semester you were here. Because I don't understand how to stop it any way else.
Yeah, that's what I would do. Because I feel like that would be the right thing to do. There's no other way.
Right.
And then you get this influence too. It's like the Matt Corral kid. He's like, hey, I came in here with these guys. I'm finishing with these guys. And then he screws up his leg and gets injured right before he's going to be a top draft pick. And then all you see all over social media and these former players and telling kids, this is why you don't play in these games. This is why you don't do that. Like, basically promoting you not to finish out what you've been signed up to do.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you used the college as much as you can. Now it's time to dip out on them.
Yep.
Yeah, I really don't know where all this is going to go.
And it's going to happen like super quick too. You know, I saw how fast they evolved one way. I think it's going to evolve another way too. It's just going to be so fast.
Yeah, honestly, with anything in life, if you want something to be screwed up, let the government get involved.
Mm-hmm.
And that is essentially what happened. They got involved, and before we could take time, do any research, figure out how this is going to work, put some ground rules in place, anything like that, they just started doing it on their own. And then it was like, okay, you can do this. And then put no rules in place because they were in such a rush to get it out there because their hand had already been forced.
And they started getting politicized, right? You started having people putting stuff out on the internet because they're trying to use it towards like re-election type things. And it just, it was a bad deal.
I'm kind of more one of those people that doesn't believe that college athletes play for free. Because if you're a regular
they don't,
college student and you go to OU and I don't know what it is, but let's say it's like $20,000 a semester, and you're there for 5 years as a player, you don't pay a dime for any of your schooling versus the guy that went there the whole time and had to get student loans and now he's got to pay all that back, and you can walk out of that university whether you make it in football or not and have a degree, and then if you go to get a job in Oklahoma and you say, I played at the University of Oklahoma, that's going to bump you up the list. And a guy's like, the guy that you're interviewing, like, hey, I know you, I watched you play football. You're going to get that job over a more qualified candidate.
Yeah. No, I mean, I know I don't always agree with them, but this is like one of the things that like Doug Gottlieb shouts at, and he's just is like, listen, the only people that say kids play for free is somebody that didn't ever play anything. Because you don't understand when you get on campus, they're getting at least 2 meals a day. You're getting per diem. You're getting, like you said, your schooling paid for, your housing. A lot of them are getting stipends already. A lot of them are getting grant money, things like that the university helped them get. So like there's a lot more to this than just they're not making any money.
Yeah, and I understand what stipends are, but explain that for somebody that might not know what a stipend is.
Yeah, so like a stipend is basically just like a set amount of money that they get every month, based on the fact that, how much money their parents made or how much money that they made or how much, like if their grandma was on disability, or there's all kinds of things that go into this. And so basically, almost all players at college level have been getting paid through stipend money. Now, it's not very much. I mean, it's a couple grand a month, but
I mean, when your housing's free and your education's free and you're getting $1,000 a month.
And most of your food is already paid for. Yeah,
exactly. Like you said, most of your food's already paid for. And I'd say it's even expanded in a lot of places to past 2 meals a day.
Yeah, no, it has. I know that, for instance, I know OSU, and I'm sure OU has done it too, but they have like a meal cart that goes around on campus that the athletes can go and get like healthy snacks throughout the day. While they're going from class to class and things like that. And that's only open to the athletes. It's not open to a normal person.
And then I always like to look at it like this. Don't get me wrong. The university pay the coaches because the coaches put good football teams out there and they make money. Well, the coaches are only going to make money if they're able to get athletes that are good that can make plays for them. So, like, I get that part of it. So I'm understanding of you need the athletes just like you need the coaches. However, if you were an athlete and you wanted to pay Nick Saban to train you personally in football, what do you think he'd charge an hour?
Right.
If you wanted to hire Jerry Smith at OU to train you in the weight room, what do you think he'd charge you an hour? Like, you couldn't go get this type of training for the next level and be able to afford it on your own. You need the university to pay for it just like they need you to play.
Yeah. No, there's a symbiotic relationship that gets lost in translation, a lot through the media and a lot through things that people like to believe. But like you said, I mean, it's not like the players get nothing and have gotten nothing. Have they gotten enough? I don't probably think so, because people have been making money off of them. Like I said, the easiest one, because that's kind of how I got started, was the video game cover. Yeah, that's wrong. Like, why?
Because in the NFL, if you're on Madden, they got to get your permission to use your likeness.
Yeah, you get paid X amount per copy and all kinds of stuff.
So and then you're like, oh, well, you play college, so we're not going to give you anything, but we're going to use your image. So, like, I get that. And I mean, that got the entire game shut down, for years. It wasn't until this NIL stuff, they're revamping the game and kind of bringing it back.
Right.
And the other interesting one, too, is, jersey sales. So you're going to sell the jersey and you're going to stick Adrian Peterson's number on the back, give him a cut of the profit. Like, that's an easy solution.
Yeah, one thing I also didn't understand that either. What I always thought was an easy solution that people kind of scoffed at or something like that is like, okay, so you don't want to give him the money right now for whatever reason. That's fine. Put it in some kind of asset
later.
Yeah, something that whenever he graduates with his degree from the University of Oklahoma or signs his first NFL deal, that he can now access the funds that he got. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't understand why that was so difficult. Like, give a kid his money that he earned.
But I mean, the players would probably never sign off on that. Like, they would probably never go for that because when you're a kid, and one thing that's kind of lost in the shuffle about a lot of these kids is they come from poor families, and if they're making money, they want to give it to their mom. They want to give it to. They grew up in a house with 6 kids on welfare and their mom's struggling, working 2 jobs, trying to pay for them. Right. They have an opportunity to get money. They want it now, and they're going to try to help their mom out or help their family.
Right. It's funny you say that. I heard a conversation with Floyd Mayweather. He came from very, very humble beginnings, right? Like, the guy is just poor as poor, literally fighting for his life. That's the reason why he became a boxer, things. And somebody was asking, like, what was the most rewarding, was it the $100 million pay-per-view fight that he did with Pacquiao? And he's like, you want me to be honest with you? He's like, the happiest that I've ever been to receive a check in my life was the first check I made for $100,000. The guy couldn't comprehend. He's like, you just made $100 million for one
it's
fight.
It's a lot when you're broke.
He's like, at that, exactly right. He said, at that time in my life, that might as well have been $1 billion. He's like, I felt like I could take a deep breath for the first time in my life and not have to worry if my lights are going to be on when I get home. So like you said, Stephen, I mean, it's all relative, right? I mean, it's some of these kids, and I have a good understanding of the things that Dez Bryant went through, and the fact that he was even able to be on a university campus and function as an adult for the most part was incredible. And then like you said, you start thinking about little things like that. It's just, it's incredible.
The other thing too, that this NIL money poses a problem too, and it's not a reason for them not to get paid or anything like that, but like Shannon Sharp said, if you give a clown money, do you make him less of a clown or do you make him a bigger clown? You give a clown money.
That was a good question.
Now he's a big clown.
Well, look at Antonio Brown, right?
Well, yeah, but my more point of I'm going with this is when you're talking about 18-year-old kids, they're a clown, but is it because they're a clown or is it because they're immature and they haven't grown up? Like they don't have an understanding.
Right.
And I think both of you would agree, probably from like 18 to 25, you're in kind of that age where you're a clown in some sense.
In most senses. It's about all I need to be.
Yeah, once you get to a certain point in life, you realize like I had no idea why I decided to do some of the things that I decided to do.
I always say, like, if you feel like you're the same person from 18 to 21, and then you feel like you're the same person from 21 to 25, then you're not growing as a person. Because if you don't look at 25 and look back at 21 and go, man, I was an idiot. Or if you're 21, you're not looking back at like 18 and going like, man, I'm an idiot. Like I was an idiot. What was I doing? What was I thinking? Then you're not growing as a person.
Yeah.
Like, it's just as simple as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all go through these stages and, development and experiences. And that's the only way to grow up and mature and is to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember who said it, but when they were talking about doing the NIL stuff and all the transfer portal and all this, it was some big coach. I don't know if it was Saban or Stoops or whoever, but basically they said, once we open up this can of worms, you can't close it.
Yeah, it's true. You can't, and that's one of the unintended consequences, I think. And like you alluded to earlier, Stephen, it's they opened it up, just trying to get it done as fast as possible. And when the government's hands got on it, they typically don't make things better. And all they did was just open the can, and then they're like, okay, have fun. Like,
here it is, have fun.
Exactly.
Another way for you guys to spend money we can tax.
Pretty much.
So I got a question on that. Like, so after your college career, you were able to do the Olympics. If you had gotten money in college, would you have been able to do the Olympics?
Technically, no, from the Olympic standpoint. So the Olympics is still seen as like an amateur, basically, like you're an amateur athlete and you can make money afterwards and during. But if you were a professional athlete, so like once they opened up the gates to be able to do that with the dream team and things like that. So I could make money off myself and do those things. I don't know if you remember, there was a guy named Jeremy Bloom at the University of Colorado, and he was an unbelievable kick returner. He ended up playing with the Eagles for a little bit as a wide receiver. But anyways, he was an Olympic level downhill skier. And so at the University of Colorado, they have a ski team. And so he was incredible, and he was going to be Olympic level, but he couldn't receive any of his winnings at the time whenever he was racing against the world, because he still wanted to play at the University of Colorado. So he had to forfeit winnings on a national landscape because he wanted to play one more year at Colorado before he went to the league.
That's dumb. And in a situation like that, what you mentioned earlier would be the perfect solution was, okay, we're going to take this money, and when you graduate college, you can have it.
Right.
But they would not even allow that if that would have been presented to them at the time.
Right. So, I mean, he made some pretty good money because, he was racing on the same circuit that you do in order to qualify for the Olympics. So, I mean, these guys they're winning, they're making, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a race, and you're placing, you're getting, a couple $1,000s. And obviously, just like we talked about, for a college kid, that's good money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just crazy.
It's just, that's one thing that the downfalls, like the negative sides of why you've got people like Brian Bosworth, wearing shirts that say the NCAA stands for National Communists Against Athletes.
Yeah.
That's the type of stuff like that has really, like just driven people crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would drive me crazy is like, you didn't know you were going to go into Olympic anything. It doesn't sound like afterwards you're like, hey, I give it a go. And it's like, well, I like to give random things a try. I just don't like to be restricted. Like, that's one of those things that wouldn't even have thought about as a restriction. Been like, oh yeah, college sports, got some money, did some other stuff, and then now I want to be an Olympian.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So it just kind of closes that door. There's unintended consequences of that. They've opened up quite a bit on the Olympic side of it, of allowing you to make money and realizing that these professional athletes are now doing this. But that Jeremy Bloom was a really good example of a kid that even like Michael Phelps and guys like that, they actually were college swimmers. And so then you're 16, 17 years old making your Olympic debut, and you can't make money
if you want to go and swim in college.
Even though you're the best swimmer in the world.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
No, it definitely is.